There are some transits that feel soft, reflective, maybe even romantic. And then there are transits like this one. This one is not soft. This is not light flirtation, surface attraction, or easy emotional energy. This is Pluto meeting Venus. And when Pluto and Venus come into tension with each other, we are no longer talking about love in its prettiest form. We are talking about desire, attachment, obsession, control, power, seduction, emotional possession, and the uncomfortable truth about what attraction can sometimes be hidden underneath it. Because Pluto doesn't just touch something and leave it the same. Pluto transforms. Pluto exposes. Pluto intensifies. Pluto strips illusions and forces what is buried to the surface. And Venus rules what we are drawn to, what we value, what we want, what we attract, what we allow, what we call beautiful, what we call love. So when Pluto and Venus clash, this is where we start having to ask deeper questions. Not who do I love, but why am I drawn to this? Not why is this chemistry so strong, but what is this attraction trying to reveal? Because this transit can bring up some of the deepest, most magnetic, most psychologically loaded, emotional energy we can experience. And if you're feeling intense right now, there's a reason. First, let's start with Pluto. Because if you don't understand Pluto, you won't understand why this energy can feel so overwhelming. Pluto is not a surface planet. Pluto governs the underworld, the subconscious, death and rebirth, the shadow, obsession, power, control, hidden motives, buried emotion, compulsion, transformation. Pluto rules what lives underneath the surface. It rules the part of us that are not always pretty, polished, or socially accepted. It rules what we repress, what we hide, what we fear, what we crave, what we feel powerless around, what we become fixated on, what we try to dominate or possess when we feel emotionally unsafe. Pluto is not interested in keeping you comfortable. Pluto is interested in truth. But Pluto often reveals truth through intensity, pressure, confrontation, emotional extremes, endings, deep attraction, psychological exposure. Pluto doesn't say, let's talk about this nicely. Pluto says, let me show you where your shadow is still running your choices. That's why Pluto transits can feel so consuming. Because they don't just skim the surface of your life, they go into the emotional basement. They go into the places you haven't fully looked at yet. And in relationships, Pluto energy can show up as obsession, jealousy, power struggles, emotional control, sexual intensity, possessiveness, fear of loss, fear of abandonment, wanting access without real accountability, needing to dominate what you secretly feel powerless around. Pluto is never casual. Pluto is always, what is the deeper truth here? And that is exactly why this transit matters. Now let's talk about Venus. Because Venus is often misunderstood as just love and romance. But Venus is much deeper than that. Venus governs love, attraction, pleasure, beauty, receptivity, connection, sensuality. values, self-worth, what you allow, what you receive, what you are available for emotionally and relationally. Venus is not just who do I like. Venus is what do I believe I deserve? And that changes everything. Because your Venus energy is deeply tied to your standards, your emotional state, your relationship patterns, your magnetism, your boundaries around love and pleasure. What feels normal to you in connection? Venus is what you naturally move toward. What feels good? What feels beautiful? What feels emotionally and sensually rewarding? But Venus can also reveal where you settle, where you overgive, where you compromise your standards, where you confuse chemistry with compatibility, where you mistake being desired for being valued. And that is where the transit gets real. Because when Pluto touches Venus, it doesn't just affect romance. It affects your self-worth, emotional standards, your attachment styles, your attachment patterns, intimacy dynamics, what you are drawn to, and what your desire is actually rooted in. So this is not just a relationship transit. This is also a self-value transit. Let's talk about the clash itself. When Pluto and Venus come into hard contact, there is often a feeling of intense attraction mixed with emotional pressure. This can feel like magnetic chemistry, obsession, craving, longing, temptation, emotional fixation, possessiveness, wanting more access, unresolved attachment surfacing, old emotional entanglements getting activated. This can bring people back into your awareness. It can stir up unresolved feelings. It can make certain attractions feel stronger than usual. It can expose where your nervous system confuses intensity with significance. And that is a big one. Because not every intense connection is a healthy one. And not every magnetic pull is aligned. Some connections are intense because they are karmic, unresolved, shadow-based, trauma-bonded, power-based, emotionally unfinished. Pluto and Venus can make attraction feel faded, when really it is revealing. That's the difference. This transit doesn't always mean this person is meant for you. Sometimes it means this dynamic is meant to show you something. And what it often shows is where love and power got tangled together, where desire and control got fused, where beauty has been used to bypass truth, where emotional attachment is stronger than emotional alignment. Pluto asks, what is underneath this attraction? Venus asks, why do I still want it? And together, they can get intense fast. Now let's get into the energy around this transit. Because this isn't just about Pluto and Venus in isolation. This kind of energy tends to stir up a whole emotional field around it. The energies surrounding Pluto and Venus are often obsession, the energy of overthinking, constantly checking, fixation, replaying, craving contact, feeling mentally and emotionally consumed. This can feel like, why can't I stop thinking about this? Because Pluto doesn't do light interest. It amplifies whatever Venus is attracted to. This transit heightens sensual and emotional desire. You may feel more magnetized, more drawn in, more tempted, more emotionally activated by attraction. But desire under Pluto is not always pure. Sometimes is not always pure. Sometimes desire is revealing lack, hunger, unmet needs, old attachment wounds, a need to feel chosen, powerful, or significant. So the question becomes, do I want this, or does something in me need this for the wrong reason? This transit can absolutely expose control dynamics, dominance, emotional leverage, withdrawing, manipulation, silent games, power imbalance, and love for connection. This is where love can stop feeling like love and start feeling like strategy. And when that happens, Pluto is trying to show you where the shadow entered the room. Emotional ownership. This transit can stir jealousy, territorial energy, possessiveness, wanting emotional ownership over someone, resentment when access is denied. This is not always dramatic on the outside. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it looks like entitlement, expectation, emotional intrusion, wanting access to your energy without earning it. And that is where boundaries become critical. Hidden truth. This transit also brings up revelation. Things can be exposed around hidden motives, emotional agendas, shadow desire, what someone actually wants, what you've been avoiding seeing. This is where illusion starts breaking. And sometimes what breaks isn't the connection. Sometimes what breaks is the fantasy. And that is still a blessing. How this shows up in real life. Let's bring this down to earth. Because grounded astrology is not just pretty spiritual words. This energy shows up in real life. You may notice during this transit someone from your past surfacing emotionally or literally. Stronger attraction to someone you know is not simple. Old relationship wounds getting triggered. Feeling drawn towards intensity over peace. Wanting clarity around a connection. Seeing manipulation or control more clearly. Becoming more aware of where you've been giving your power away in love. Realizing that chemistry alone is not enough. This can also show up as finally seeing a dynamic for what it really is. Pulling your energy back. Recognizing emotional hooks. Reclaiming standards. Feeling your own worth more deeply. Because Pluto Venus doesn't only expose dysfunction, it also deepens your discernment, self-respect, emotional honesty, standards, magnetism rooted in self-possession. That's the higher use of this transit. So what this transit is trying to teach you, the difference between attraction and alignment, because those are not the same. You can be deeply attracted to something that is unhealthy, unavailable, controlling, unresolved, emotionally expensive. And this transit can also teach you the difference between being desired and being valued. Because some people desire access to you without actually having the capacity to honor you. And this Pluto Venus can expose that very clearly. This transit also asks, where have you confused intensity with intimacy? That one matters. Because intensity can feel intoxicating, but intimacy requires safety, truth, consistency, mutual respect, emotional accountability. And Pluto will absolutely expose where one has been masquerading as the other. This transit is also trying to teach you where your self-worth still needs to become non-negotiable, because Venus rules value. And when Pluto presses on Venus, it often reveals where you're still available for less than what you know you deserve, where your standards still wobble under chemistry, where your body says yes, but your soul says absolutely not. And if this truth is surfacing, that is not punishment, that is correction. What to watch for and how to move through it. So how do you move through this energy consciously? Watch for obsession, emotional spiraling, fantasy loops, checking behaviors, power games, wanting clarity from people who benefit from your confusion, giving access where there is no safety, confusing emotional intensity with divine alignment. Instead, ask yourself, what is this energy showing me about my relationship to desire? What am I being asked to see more clearly? What part of me is being activated here? Is this connection aligned, or is it just intense? Do I feel more powerful in this or more destabilized? That last one is important, because real alignment doesn't require you to abandon yourself to maintain it. And this transit will absolutely show you where you've done that in the past. So the medicine here is self-honesty, self-possession, emotional boundaries, energetic discernment, refusing to romanticize what your nervous system is clearly warning you about. Pluto and Venus together can feel like temptation, attraction, intensity, desire, revelation, emotional pressure, shadow surfacing through connection. But at its highest level, this transit is not here to ruin love. It is here to purify it, to strip away the illusion, the control, attachment rooted to fear, attraction rooted in lack, intimacy rooted in imbalance. And what remains after that? Truth, self-worth, discernment, standards, power, and a much deeper understanding of what love actually is and what it absolutely is not. But sometimes the real lesson is not, how do I hold on to this? Sometimes the real lesson is, why did I ever think I had to lose myself to receive love in the first place? And after that is where the real transformation begins. This transit isn't just about love. It's about who you become when love can no longer distort your value.